Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I hope the weekend went well. Let me start with just alerting you to a future MindSpeak session with the author, historian, Professor Howard French. We're going to be speaking about China and Africa, and Howard is, of course, the author of China's Second Continent, amongst many other books, and really is a wonderful intellectual, and I look forward to hosting him at MindSpeak. I did an interview a few years ago on the occasion of China's Second Continent. Have a listen to get an idea about whom I'm talking about. Political Reflections. A leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has just threatened to hit the US bases in Qatar, the UAE and Afghanistan, saying that the base of Meni and the Dafra is only 300 kilometers away from Iran, and our rockets will reach. A common double standard whereby politically convenient terrorist attacks are simply reframed as shootings or militancy, while politically inconvenient acts of resistance are smeared as terrorism. This is Andrew Koribiko in an interesting article about recent events in Guada. Guada is the escape hatch for the Chinese out of the containment strategy, and therefore its importance to the Chinese cannot be gainsaid. However, Guada is in Baluchistan, and the Baluchis have been in revolt on and off since independence. My article over the weekend was Babur, William Dalrymple, and exactly what Iranian threats. Like us, many have spoken over this spring, but they were gone in the twinkling of an eye. We conquered the world with bravery and might, but we did not take it with us to the grave, said Emperor Babur in his contemporaneously written autobiography, the Baburnama. The reason Babur came to mind was because the historian William Dalrymple has taken himself off to Ashki, Kent, Babur's childhood home, which is situated above the Sirdarya, and has been tweeting from there. There are many mythical tales about Babur, but my favorite is the story of Humayun. In 1530, Humayun, Babur's beloved eldest son and heir apparent, was stricken by a fever. Despite the best efforts of the royal physicians, his condition steadily worsened. Driven to despair, Babur consulted a man of religion who told him that the remedy was to give in alms, the most valuable thing one had, and to seek cure from God. Babur is said to have replied thus: "I am the most valuable thing that Humayun possesses. Than me he has no better thing. I shall make myself a sacrifice for him. May God, the Creator, accept it." Humayun possessed a priceless diamond, they said, which could be sold and the proceeds given to the poor. Babur would not hear of it. "What value has worldly wealth?" Babur is quoted to have said, "and how can it be a redemption for Humayun? I, myself, shall be his sacrifice." He walked 3 times around Humayun's bed, praying, "O God, if a life may be exchanged for a life. I, who am Babur, I give my life and my being for a Humayun." A few minutes later he cried, "We have borne it away, we have borne it away." And sure enough, from that moment, Babur began to sicken, while Humayun grew slowly well. Babur died near Agra on December the 21st, 1530. He left orders for his body to be buried in Kabul. I have digressed, but William Dalrymple then tweets exactly what Iranian threats. The US has deployed B-52 bombers to the Middle East, the Lincoln Strike Group, and the Pentagon announced on Friday that it is deploying an amphibious assault ship and a Patriot missile battery to the Middle East to bolster an aircraft carrier force sent to counter alleged threats from Iran. The USS Arlington, which transports Marines, amphibious vehicles, conventional landing craft, and rotary aircraft, and the Patriot air defense system, will join the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group and a B-52 bomber task force headed toward the Gulf after intelligence reports suggested Iran was planning some sort of attack in the region. The deployment is in response to indications of heightened Iranian readiness to conduct offensive operations against US forces and our interests, the Pentagon said in a statement. Iran has not been able to sell a single barrel of oil since the beginning of May, as not a single ship has been seen leaving Iran's oil terminals so far this month. They once sold 2.5 barrels per day, which equated to about $100 million per day. Since the beginning of May, their daily income has been zero from oil sales. This level of financial and coercive sanction warfare is simply unprecedented. President Trump has been a big proponent of coercive financial and sanction warfare, and its expression vis-a-vis Iran is its apogee. Marwan Bishara wrote, "These US demands basically constitute total Iranian surrender, not only to the US, but also to Israel and Saudi Arabia." M.K. Badrakumar writes, "If there can be a lethal game of Russian roulette in international politics, this is it." Russian roulette is a game of chance where players spin the cylinder of a revolver with a single bullet in turns, put the muzzle against their head, and pull the trigger. The player has a 16.67% chance of firing a bullet into his head if there is one bullet in the 6-chamber revolver. Each player starts by spinning the cylinder, thus each player has an equal chance of being killed by the bullet. Quite obviously, it's an insane game that US President Trump started on May the 8th last year. A big question can be put whether Trump himself wants another Middle Eastern war. The price of oil has surged 34.173% in 2019, and in big part because of the ratcheting higher of tensions with Iran. No number of Trump tweets will dampen down the price. The Iranians will surely manage to shutter the Straits of Hormuz, even if after an asymmetric fashion. What we know is this: Iran is at the Hunter S. Thompsonian edge. The edge, there is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. If the US thinks Tehran will just roll over, which appears to be the case, then they are exhibiting the same deluded ideas that they exhibited a day before the peacock throne got plucked. And I concluded by saying Iran is a geopolitical bleeding edge. Exactly what Iranian threats was a tweet by William Dalrymple. The Saudi energy minister says 2 of the kingdom's vessels were targeted and significantly damaged in an attack near the UAE on Sunday morning. Tehran sees additional US missile deployment to the Middle East as psychological warfare. Akshi Kent, this is the view Babur grew up with, huge mud brick walls, pink in the evening light, rear up over an oasis. Snow peaks rise in the near distance. Irrigated farmland stretches away from the Sir Darya as far as the eye can see, waterfowl called to roost below the fort walls. The Sir Darya, or Jaxartes, running just below Babur's home fortress of Akshikent near Namangan in the Fergana Valley of Uzbekistan. A war between US and Iran would be a huge disaster. Don't let the genie out of the bottle, Jan Eliasson. The USS Abraham Lincoln is replacing another carrier rotated out of the Gulf last month. An aircraft carrier has at least 40 to 50 planes on it and 6,000 forces gathered within it. Was a serious threat for us in the past, but now the threats have switched to opportunities, said Amir Ali Hajizadeh, head of the Guard's Aerospace Division. If Americans make a move, we will hit them in the head, he said. Interesting story in the Times. For us at GCHQ, this was largely desk screen-based campaign, said Hannigan. This is the inside story of the killing of Jihadi John, worth a read. It's incredible how they tracked him down from his size, his hands, above all his voice, made identifying him quite easy, quite a character. The Chinese yuan continues to depreciate against the dollar as risks of an escalation in the trade dispute between China and the US increase. 6.8485, the weakest since the 8th of January. Global Times News responded, the perception that China cannot bear a trade war is a fantasy and misjudgment. And it's now become a pissing contest, hasn't it, about who has the stronger population. Then Bruno Makaish says, yes, but his critics are also wrong. Look, it's easy. If the costs of tariffs were entirely paid by the US consumer, then China would have no objection to the tariffs. China and the United States are playing a perilous game of chicken in the Asia-Pacific. US and its allies seek to prevent a new Peking order in the Indo-Pacific. The United States is set to unveil a new Indo-Pacific strategy which aims to keep China's maritime ambitions in check. New strategy would focus on making sure that no one country can change international law or the status of the South China Sea. So that's why we conduct the freedom of navigation operations and the other presence operations in the South China Sea. Through its expanded strategic presence in the area, Washington hoped to convince Beijing against deploying additional military systems and in fact remove the military systems to artificially reclaimed islands in the South China Sea, he said. On Monday, the guided missile destroyers USS Preble and USS Chung Hoon sailed within 12 nautical miles of the China-held Gavin and Johnson reefs during so-called freedom of navigation operations. 3 days later, for the first time in history, the US, Japan, India and the Philippines conducted joint freedom of navigation exercises en route to Singapore. Last month, France, a major naval power with Indo-Pacific territories, deployed its frigate Vendémiaire to the Taiwan Strait for its own freedom of navigation operations in Indo-Pacific waters. And then this article's calling it a perilous game of chicken. The point is, as I wrote in October last year, the incident with the USS Decatur, where a Chinese warship came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur, is surely a precursor. I called this in July last year a chickie run, and it still remains such. And I asked who blinks first. The Chinese government, of course, and I wrote about this in July last year, has been quite surgical in its response, targeting the farm economy. This geopolitical contest will likely escalate dangerously. Powerful forces on both sides are driving the world's two strongest countries toward full-fledged confrontation. Latest YouGov European election poll for the Times puts the Brexit Party 18 points ahead and the Tories 5th.